Hello, folks. Welcome back. We're still on section 5, but this time I'm going to set up Active Directory on the second server so I could have a replica. That's what it's called. So when I set up Active Directory on like for a backup, it's called a replica, like an additional domain controller, just in case one domain controller crashes or fails. I have another one up and running. I can never depend just on one domain controller. I want to show you something first on server one. So I'm going to go back to server one. Let me just log on. So there's a console. I'm going to look at every console in details, but for now, look what it says here on the domain controllers. I only have one, and the name of the site. Do you remember from the first actual topic that we talked about? First actual like section. The site is a physical location, right? It's like an actual location itself. So and it's called default for a site name. I don't want that. What I want to do is I want to go back to the server manager, and there's a console. Little by little, we're going to be covering all the consoles sites and services, which means that's where I can manage the locations for the company, like headquarters, branch office, etc. How many locations does a company have? If a company only has one location, I'll never have to touch this. I like to rename the actual site. Look at this. Rename it to, let's say, New York. And I only have one domain controller in New York right now, as you see, right? Just one domain controller. So if I minimize this and I go back to the yellow book and refresh, right? I should see New York as a site. I could have also right click, choose properties, and I go back to NTDS settings right here. It's a global catalog server, as you see, right? And I can see it's a global catalog, not a domain control. So there's a GC and a DC, and we will see the difference. Well, I only have one server, so I'm going to go to my second server. Remember, my second server is still a standalone server. It's a work group. It's not hosting Active Directory. So it has its own local database. So if I go to tools and I go to computer management, I want to test something with you guys here so you can actually see what's happening. And I check local user groups and users, and I create a user. This time I'm going to call it user 100. All right. And let me put an actual password. And let me remove this check mark from the box. And I'm going to create a group and call it group 100, GRP 100, add, and I'm going to put user 100 in the group and click on create. So this is actually the local machine itself. What I'm planning to do with this machine is to have it as an additional domain controller. So I'm going to go to manage. So this is actually for the same physical location, manage, add roles and features. And I'm going to go next. So same steps. I'm going to be installing the role Active Directory domain services. Next, next, and install. Right. So this should not actually take long. We still didn't have any clients. We didn't join anything to the domain. I'm just looking at the server side, how many domain controls to actually have. What is minimum per a location? And I'll tell you this, two, like two or more in case one fails, I have another one up and running. And it also depends how many users are you actually supporting in your company itself. I would not go more than 500 user accounts for the same DC. Imagine everybody at 8 in the morning, they're trying to process their logon. Look how much traffic you're sending, how much load is actually going to just one domain controller. That's why it's good to have multiple domain controllers, at least two. It's good for in case there's an actual disaster, one fails, I have another one actually up and running. So let's give this a moment. Of course, today you have also cloud service, which is Microsoft Azure, right? But you know what? Let me put it this way. Government agencies, financial institutions, they would more put a trust when it's actually on premises. It all depends, all right? So there is the cloud out there that can be hosting, doing the same work versus on premises where you have the actual servers inside your actual location itself. So this should be actually finishing up soon. And after this, I'm going to be promoting the server to a domain controller. So let's give it a few seconds. And this time you'll see it's going to be using a different option, right? A different option. It's not going to be a new forest, which means a new domain. No, it's going to be an additional domain controller, which means I am trying to set up an actual replica. All right. So whatever happens on DC1 is going to sync to DC2. So server one will sync to server two. I like to call them domain controllers, not servers, because they're actually hosting active directory, right? So this should be finishing in a few seconds. Let's see. There you go. Promote the server to a domain controller. And look, add a domain controller to an existing domain, right? That's what I need. Add a domain controller to an existing domain. For me to do this, I have to have full control to the domain. So I have to actually authenticate with a user account that is a member of which group. Let me just show you. We're going to be talking about groups. Watch this. So on the users, there's a group that is actually called the domain admins. If you're a member of this group, you have full control to the domain. Only administrator is a member of this group. We'll be managing users, but that's the user account that I'm actually authenticating with to set up a replica. Enterprise admins has full control to the entire forest. Okay, domain admins is just to the domain. So I'm going to go back to my second server and put the domain over here. I could say change, right? To specify the actual credentials itself. What is the name of the domain? Udemy.local. Look, add a domain controller to an existing domain, right? That's what I'm doing over here to an existing domain. I'm not setting up a new forest, guys. So we're not setting up like a new company or a new organization. That's not what we're actually doing. We're going to be setting up an actual replica, right? An actual replica itself. So this is going to be like an additional domain controller to the setup itself, right? What I could do, because this machine is actually a standalone server, so what I could actually do, I could go ahead and join it to the domain, like make sure it's actually a member server first. I could do that. I could actually skip that. I could just type over here, for example, udemy.local and the credentials, which is Udemy slash administrator. That's the user account that we're actually using. All right. And I'm putting the actual password. I have domain admin rights to perform this actual function. Now, why do you think, let me look at a full screen. Why do you think I created some user accounts over here? I wanted to show you when I create some user accounts, I'm going to be losing them. Why will I be losing them? Because I'm trying to make this server the same as server one. So anything that is actually on the server will be actually gone. This is going to be deleted, right? And the group will be actually deleted. So that's why I did this. On server one, when I was setting up a new forest, they got upgraded because it's going to that domain. All right. That's what I wanted to show you. And this is a worker machine, which means I don't have the sysvol, right? No NTDS folder, none of that, as you notice. So let me just go ahead and continue next. It should be able to find it. Look, am I going to be putting DNS on that server? I should have at least two DNS servers. For now, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to show you. And I'm not going to make it as a global catalog. It's going to be just a DC so I could see the differences between them. And the name of the site is New York. Read only is only for caching users' credentials. But for now, I don't want it to be a global catalog or a DNS. I want it to be just a domain control so you can see the difference. And the site is New York. It's in the same physical location. All right. And then we're going to compare them and see what is the difference between them. So I'm going to go next, replicate from any. I only have one, all right? So I could do that. Install from media, which means I could actually back up the database of Active Directory on a tape or external drive or a flash drive, and then restore from backup in case it's going from one physical location to another. But if it's in the same site, it could be going over the network. And I'm going to go next. And here's the database, location of it. Next, same thing. So as I said, I could be moving it somewhere else too, right? I'm going to leave it as a C drive. If I want, I could actually move this later. There's an actual command line that allows me to move the database, the sysvol, all these different tools to another location, let's say to another drive. It could be a RAID 1, it could be a RAID 5, right? So it could be any of that. But for now, I'm going to say, you know what? Let's leave it as the C Windows NTDS folder. That's where I want to actually leave everything by default. So that's a default location. That's where I always look if it's a domain controller or not. Civil, which again, member contains the group policy objects. NTDS is a database. Member is called .dit. Directory information tree will be backing up the database of Active Directory. So this is something that we'll be actually doing. Okay, just to let you know. So I'm going to leave it as it is, and I'm just going to go next, and see how this works for us. And install. This is not going to take long. So it's changing membership because it's going to become a domain controller, right? I'm going to start noticing something here. So when I go to my first server, when I go to domain controller, I only see one. If I refresh, it's not going to say GC. It will say DC. Oh, there you go. You see that? So it's actually under the domain controls. Oh, you remember, this is an organizational unit, not a container. We'll see the differences between them. So when I open domain controls, I could see which servers are hosting Active Directory. I could even go to sites and services, refresh my site, which is New York, and expand servers. Now I have two. So this is a good sign. It looks like the other one is restarting. Let me take a look. There you go. It's finished. The database is kind of small. Not much had to be actually synced from one to another. And guess what, guys? This is not going to take a while. And we'll see why. I'm going to explain why the first server took around like 5 to 10 minutes to process the login, where the second one didn't. We'll see that later on in the course. So this is about to restart the system. So now my second server is an additional domain controller, which means, yes, it is. It's hosting Active Directory. So whatever happens on DC1 replicates to DC2. Whatever happens on DC2 replicates to DC1. So they replicate to each other, right? So it's actually sitting there as a backup. But guess what? There is a big difference between them. And you know what? When you actually get on an interview and somebody tells you what is the difference between two domain controls or two global catalog servers that belong to the same domain, if you know the right answer, that means you know exactly how Active Directory works. How does it work behind the scenes? Okay, because you can't just say, you know what, whatever happens on DC1 happens on DC2. If DC1 crashes, but he can continue working normally because I still have DC2, which is my replica, which is my additional domain control. And guess what? That's not actually right. And we'll see why, because there is a big difference between DC1 and DC2, something in terms of GC, DC, and something we're going to be introducing, which is called the FSMA roles, which stands for, flexible single master operations. And there's actually five of them. And we'll see what each one is. Those are like the engines of Active Directory. See, what I'm planning to do first is just to work with the structure of the domain controller itself, like just Active Directory itself. Then we'll be concerned about the computers and all that is part of the domain. Let me minimize this and go back to server one and see. So this one is fully done. Let me just see. There you go. It has to actually get the replication partner, right? So they're going to be getting it from each other. So when I right click over here and I could do change domain controller, I only see server one. I don't see the other server. So the other server is still in the process of finishing installing. Then it's going to go ahead and actually restart. Look at this. Under computers, I have nothing, which means I don't have any machines that are part of the domain. Under users, I only have group one and user one. I'm not going to see user 100 and group 100. Those will actually be deleted, by the way. So that's just something to keep in mind. They're going to be deleted. This should be restarting soon. Yes. Okay. Let me just show you one last thing. Let me just see if I could see both screens at the same time. To get actually see, and let me go back to server one over here. So if I open DNS, and look, I'm gonna refresh. And guess what? These will be refreshed. Now it's going to tell me, well, guess what? You actually have another server that is hosting Active Directory, right? So let me just check. Looks like, yeah, it's about to do it. So I could actually go ahead and just restart. This should actually be fine, right? Give it a few seconds and it should be back to normal. As you see, it looks like it's restarting, right? So now it's going to start talking to the other server itself. So it's going to be talking to who? It's going to be talking to server one. Now these records will be refreshed. So I'm going to be refreshing over here and I'm going to see that these records will be actually syncing. So I'm going to see other records for server two. So I'm going to see the number two, but guess what? I'm not going to see it for GC. I'm going to see it for Kerberos, for K password, and also LDAP. So I'll be seeing for, but I'm not going to see it for the rest of them because it's not actually a global catalog server. Remember that? It's not an actual GC. So that's one thing to keep in mind. There you go. It's restarting. So it's just going to take a few seconds until it processes the logons and all that. And this should actually refresh soon enough. All right. So let's give it a moment. And we could see, like at the beginning, yes, it does take a while for things to process, but then after that, things will actually start moving much faster. I'm just gonna check and see over here if it actually synced or not. Because if I did everything right, I'm gonna see three more records from my second server, guys. Right? Let me just take a look. There you go. So this is actually working. It's spinning as you see. So it's actually on the right track. So that's good. It's just the first time when it restarts, it takes a while to process. But I'm going to show you because right now I only have one DNS server. So I can be in trouble, guys. I could actually be in trouble. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Let's see if it's processing the logon and see how this actually works for us. So it's actually getting there. Let me just take a look. As long as it says applying computer settings and all that, that means everything is actually running smooth. Everything will actually be fine. So let's just keep that in mind. So at least right now, I actually have two domain controllers. One of them is a GC and the other one is a DC. And we're going to see the differences between them. And actually did this on purpose, guys. All right, just to let you know, this is actually done on purpose. Let me take a look and see back on server one. There you go. Look, remember what I told you? LDAP for server two. Kate answered for server two. Purpose for, but GC no, because it's only a domain controller. All right. Okay. Well, under domain controls, I see both of them over here. Let me just refresh and GC and DC. So if I try to change, if I see the other one, no, it's still not syncing. That's fine. How about here? The replication partners. We'll be seeing this. So I should be seeing the partners of each one of them. It's going to take a while for at the beginning for initial replication. So you'll see that. So it's applying computer settings. This is actually good. Let me just make sure I could log in. And I want to open Active Directory using the computers and just show you what's actually there. I'm going to be losing the local accounts that I created on the server because I made this server exactly the same thing as the first server. So the database is going to be syncing, but whatever's actually on this server will actually be lost. It should not be in the list itself. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Just at the beginning is going to take a while. Just the first time as you see, is going to take a while to process the logon. So what it's actually doing is going to check with servers. That's authentication protocol that's going to be using. So you dummy, this is a good sign. And let me just go ahead and log on. The protocol that is used is called Kerberos to verify the username and the password. Protocol that Active Directory is based on is actually called LDAP, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, which is port what 389. It's actually good to know port numbers, especially if they have to actually pass through a firewall, right? So let's keep that in mind. All right, so this is good. I'm just waiting for my server manager. That's what I'm waiting for. Server manager. Let's see how this actually works for us. Let's see. So it should get populated automatically since it's actually a domain controller. And then after that, on a new section, we'll be comparing both and see more and more details about both of these domain controls. One of them is a DC and the other one is actually what, guys? A GC. Remember that? I could check that from here. All right. I could check that from server one. So watch this. One of them is a GC and the other one is a DC. Let me take a look and see sites if these partners got replicated. No, not yet. This takes a while. That's actually fine. How about if I try to change the main controller? Do I see? No, not yet. It's still getting processed. That's actually normal, guys. Okay, that's normal. So let me just see. This is just taking a while at the beginning to log in and process the logon itself. Right, so it should be coming soon up and running. At the beginning, initial replication does actually take a while, right? That's one thing to keep in mind. And there's actually a profile for a new firewall, which is actually for the domain that I want to actually see. And probably I actually have to turn that off. So I should see Server Manager in a few seconds, right? So that's something to keep in mind. I tried that not to make speed things up so you guys don't have to pause the video and go back and see what I just did. So it does make things easier for yourself, right? That's why I keep on checking. I like to check and see, right? So this one, I should see server manager right now. This is my second server, right? So it is getting processed. So we don't actually go that fast. If I'm taking the class, I don't feel like I want to pause all the time and see how these actually work for us. Let me just take a look and see. I should see ADDS. I should not see DNS. That's what I wanted to show you. I should not see DNS in the list. But I could do this. I could open users and computers. Watch this now, right? And this time you're going to start realizing, oh, I'm not going to see that actual local account that I was actually referring to. I lost that account. Remember, because I'm trying to make server 2 exactly like server 1, but server 2 is actually a domain controller. It's not a global catalog. So look, it tells me over here which one I'm actually connected to, which is server 2. If I expand and I go to domain controllers, I see both 1 and 2. 2 is a DC. If I go to users, I'm not going to see that user account, which is user 100. See, it's gone and group 100 is gone because I made server 2 as server 1, right? And same thing, if I go to tools, I don't see DNS. There's no DNS here. That could be a problem. But if I go to sites and services, right? I just want to make sure that at this section, we actually finished our second server, which is a replica. You can see the exact same thing. The location is New York, and I have both of my actual servers. I have server 1, right? And I have, look, see, this is what I was waiting for. This is the partner, and server two's partner is server 1. So, and this is good. That's why it took a while to process at the beginning. This is perfect. So as you see, we're done with this actual section. And now our next section, guys, we'll be looking at the differences between both of these domain controls, the GC and the DC, FISMA roles, DNS, and all that. All right. So we'll see you guys in a moment. All right, guys, then in a moment, we'll continue on with the process.